So I thought I'd have a little fun today and hit a fun topic. Try out a couple of things, flip this camera sideways, see what that looks like. Kind of hard to keep my head in frame doing that. Uh, anyway, I want to change tempo a little bit from what I was doing. It's been a long day. Use this kind of relax. So there's this idea that came to me a long while back, a couple of years ago. Is that a long while? I don't know. But it came from a book, a couple of books I read, and there's controversy around those books. Anyway, it's from the principles of 10,000 repetitions make an expert, and like some inherent biases that we grow up in. That's not really the point, and that's not what I'm hashing out, if that's true or not. But some things I've observed and want to make a relation here. Yeah. So, horoscopes, astrology is what I wanted to talk about. Like, this astrology process keeps reoccurring and reoccurring. Everybody likes to read their horoscope, and then generally we tend to find associations with that horoscope, and that alone is interesting. That's like the mind trying to make yourself fit into it, or so it seems. But what I want to talk about a little more was uh, that's going back for a long time through a lot of different cultures with the people put a lot of faith in that system, right? So I'm not here to make fun of it either. I think there's fundamentally, I think there's a lot of truth that science chooses to ignore due to inconvenience. And a proper scientific method would explore any thesis without judgment, which would go to say that most scientists who preform a judgment are not conducting true science. But that's a different topic too. But what I see with this astrology is, and if you're not familiar, that's your star signs. I don't even know what they are. I don't even know which one I am. But it's like the time that you're born couples to planetary alignments and star signs and on, and it gets rather elaborate from what I gather. Like, I've dabbled, I read a horoscope or two. I really don't know that much about it. But what I do know is that when the time someone is born, based on the way our societies are structured, absolutely does have an influence of the opportunities that that person may or may not be exposed to. And as adults, we forget to think about things in this way. So, like, we we see ourselves as who we've become over the years that we have become that. We forget how little time was in between event when we were younger. So, like, I am in my 40s now, so I have 40 years of time frame to look back on whenever I'm judging an event. I have a lot of experience that tells me if I wait, things will change within a specified amount of time. When someone's younger, you don't have this mode of reference, and change can potentially happen a lot faster, be more acute. And that's what I'm trying to highlight here is like personal development. So originally I was going to say like this relates to schools and when somebody goes to schools, but then I realized like it goes back further than that because even before that we were farmers, and the time frame that which we would farm dictate, like there's different things going on based on where you are in the season. And what that really gets to is exposure and like the way you're treated growing up. So like if I am born, we'll do school as an example. So if I'm born early in March, April, that April time frame, When I'm coming into my formative months is when a lot of people tend to have a lot of time off and get more exposure with their parents. Like a ton of emotional development happens in these short time frames when we're much younger. And where we fall into that cycle ultimately affects who we become as a person. Now, that's not to debate the biological stew that makes us who we are. That's very much a factor, and maybe that's a fun debate I'll get into, nurture versus nature at one point. But what I'm trying to show here is we've all heard about the kid who got held back or put forward into the school system, okay, and due to a birth date being late or early compared with the time frame that they cut them off. And that has to do with the child's, like, you can literally have up to a year's variation between children within the same classroom. And the amount of progress that can happen in a year on an emotional level is staggering when you're a child compared to when you're an adult. Things have slowed down. So what I see is absolutely when and how you're born exposes what you're exposed to, who you're exposed to, how much time you get with your parents, how much time you get exposed to older children, all these things. And that, to me, ultimately dictates kind of your grow up cycle and who and how you become and all that good stuff. The more I thought about it, the more I took it back. It's like, was that hold true? And it's like, I think it absolutely does. If you go back 200-300 years back to a culture that primarily farms, we may not see the same pattern, but we still see patterns. And those patterns are when it's coming time to tend the fields, the mother and father will have less time with the child during the rearing years, so they may be more independent or less exposed depending on where they are in their life cycle. These ultimately also affect how a child comes up and develops as a human. So what I propose is these were realized by the people that pay attention. I think there's ancient wisdom rooted in the astrology. I think statistically, hypothetically, not hypothetically, but statistically, when you trend enough people, someone born in a particular time frame tends to be a particular type of personality because they've fallen into the cycle that exposes them to a particular set of events that's consistent. So you have that time frame as long as the society is consistent, and then you have multiple children being born into that particular cycle, and that cycle repeats. And that's where these patterns start to emerge because they all have similar experiences. So that's, I think, people started picking up on it and then started realizing and tracking it and mapping that out. Like, these type of people tend to be this way. These type of people tend to be this way. And ultimately, it got divided out into the procession and then whatever the terms are. Like, I'm not gonna put you those through. But yeah, that's what I've ultimately kind of come to conclude. I think there's a lot of things like this too. I think there's a hint of truth or a hint of wisdom in a lot of these things that stay forward to us. And I think that's why we tend to believe in these things a lot of times. It's because inherently there's a portion of it we think to be true. And it's also, I kind of dig on science here a little bit. It's incredibly irritating to watch scientists act like they know things and then to disprove something before they've properly tested it. It's like, I was always taught that true science is you propose at least. That's your one shot at your ego talking like, I think that all this stuff happens, right? That's your shot to go, look at me. After that, the experiments get conducted, and whatever happens is what happens. And then you have to conclude If you've designed the experiment well enough, whatever the outcome is must be the reality. But modern science seems to bypass this. They seem to preform the judgment of things based on other judgments and, frankly, an arrogance about their knowledge about reality. But I don't know about you, but the older I get, the more I realize I really don't know anything. I just think I do. Anyway, that was a fun little take. Maybe I'll expand on that later, but thanks.